This is not my cup of tea. My voice is probably going to shake the entire time, so just get used to it. I don't like speaking in front of one person or two people, and especially a room full of people. But I do feel like conquering fear and choosing faith and freedom over fear has kind of been my story for the last 5 years. So I remember hearing Joyce Meyer speak once, and she said, just because you're afraid of something, it doesn't mean you're not supposed to do it. Sometimes you just have to do it afraid. So I'm doing this afraid, so just try to disregard my nerves. But I also felt like when Aunt Janice asked me to give my testimony, my initial response was like, I'm sorry, I can't do that because I'm scared. But I got to message her back, and I was getting ready to say no, and then I just hit backspace, and I thought, if God's brought me through something that the devil had me bound, why would I let the devil have more glory and not share what God can do? Maybe it'll help someone else, So, and he fought me until this very day. I was like, maybe I can just say my stomach hurts. I can't go up there, I'm thinking of all these ideas to get out of it, but I know that that's just another confirmation that God wants to do something, and he wants to use my testimony, no matter how little it is, how different it is. Maybe no one is going through that exact situation, but I hope and I pray, and I've been praying, that in some way your bondage, no matter what it is, if it's addiction or depression or alcoholism, whatever it is, that you can see my story and know that no matter what you go through, God's there and he can bring you out of it. And I'm rambling. Okay, so I'm just going to start with my story. I was born and raised in a Christian family, and my mom's right there, and she raised me and my sister, and I'm so emotional. I'm such an emotional person, so I'm probably going to cry like 28 times. So she raised me and my sisters to all love God, and not just, go to church and sing the songs and go home. Like, every day, we read our Bible, and we prayed, and we learned how to have a true relationship with God, and our heart's desire was truly to please him. And so from the time we were, able to understand God's presence, we were in his presence, and we lived for him, and we were homeschooled, so that kind of helped us, kind of be sheltered from what the world had. And in our world, it was just serving God in any way possible. And so I was raised to know what it meant to have a true relationship with God, and not just to want to please him because that's what you do as a Christian, but because I loved him. And so my whole life, and these things don't make you a super Christian or anything, but I strived so hard to please God. I never drank, I never smoked, I never cussed, I was saving myself for marriage. I had all of these things that I was just trying to say, like, God, look, like, this is how much I love you. I'm devoting myself to you. So I lived that way, and I was 27, and I met a man, and he was handsome, and he was charming, and he really just knew all the right things to say at all the right times. And I've always kind of had self-esteem problems, and I just self-doubted myself, and I never thought I was as pretty as my sisters or as good as them. So I just had this self-doubt. I was the youngest, and I always just followed them around and wanted to be like them. And he made me feel important, and he made me feel beautiful. And those things really, I grabbed onto that because I wanted to feel cherished. I wanted to feel worthy, and he made me feel that way in the beginning. I remember I thought he was such a gentleman because, we had been dating a couple months, and then he asked if he could kiss me, and I thought, wow, he's respectful. And so I fell quickly for him. And it wasn't long after that he was over at my house, and I had caught him in a lie, and that was immediately a red flag for me because, I want my relationships built on Christ, and I want them to be built on honesty. And my whole life, if I see a red flag, probably too soon, I'm like, okay, you're done. Who's next? Because I don't want to waste my time building something on something that's not godly. And so when I caught him in that lie, I said, this isn't going to work. It needs to be built out of honesty and trust, and I can't trust you. And I was walking from the living room to the kitchen, and he just stopped me, and he put me up against the wall, and he had his hands on both sides of me, and he wouldn't let me pass. And he said, no, you're not breaking up with me. And I remember that's the instant that fear came in, and it stayed there. And I said, but I don't want to be with you. And he said, you're going to stay with me because you're not leaving me, and I need you. And I tried to walk away, and he grabbed me by the arms, and he put me back. And I didn't know what to do. And so at this point, all I thought was just tell him what he wants to hear so he'll stop. And so I said, okay, we'll figure it out. Let's just stop. And he stopped, and I just brushed it under the rug and acted like it didn't happen, and I stayed with him. And then, shortly after that, it was like he was poking at me to see what he could chip away, what he could destroy in my life, what he could change, what good parts about me he could make bad. And one day, it was snowing really bad, and he had brought his bags to stay over. And I said, that's not something that because I had my own house and he lived with his parents. And he wanted to stay there. And I said, no, I have morals, and I just don't think that's a good idea. It doesn't look good. What are the neighbors going to think? And he said, so you're going to choose, what other people think instead of my safety? I don't feel safe driving. And I remember I felt bad. I felt like, oh my goodness, that's so rude of me. And so then it was the manipulation just entered. And I said, okay, you could stay. And after that, he stayed all the time. It was like he lived there. And so I'm already starting to feel shame, and I'm starting to feel like, God, like, what do I do? How do I get out of this? And wasn't long after that until he took my purity. And I remember he, started to do things, and I was verbally, the most felt like I could do was just tell him what I wanted and hope that he would respect my wishes. And I would say, please stop, I don't want you to do that. And he knew I was saving myself for marriage, and he just persisted. And so I physically tried to push him away. And so he held my hands down, and he did what he wanted to do. And I cried. And I remember thinking, like, how could this bring someone pleasure if you're destroying someone? And so when he was done, I told him to leave, and he left. And he came back the next morning, and I wouldn't let him in, and he was begging. And he knew I would give in, so I let him in. And he begged for my forgiveness. And he said, I went home last night, and I prayed, and God really showed me how wrong I was. And he forgave me, and if God can forgive me, I think that you should too. You need to have grace like God. And I forgave him. And then it was after that that happened all the time. And after that, I didn't fight him, though. I just let him do what he wanted, because I felt like he already took everything that I've been saving. And what's the point, And I still had a relationship with God. Like, I still went to church, and I still tried, but I felt so far because my lifestyle. And I knew that I wasn't pleasing God, but I didn't know how to get out. And I just felt so trapped. And he had a key made, another key made to my house, so I didn't have a way out. I tried multiple times to break up with him. He would come in, I'd lock myself in the bathroom, and he'd threaten to break down the door, and I would always just give in to fear. Fear was the number one thing that Satan knew. That was my issue was fear. That if he could get me afraid, I could do whatever he wanted, and he used that against me because I was afraid. He would tell me a story about how his past girlfriend, they broke up, and he went back to get his stuff from her house, and she called the police, and she had her face all bruised up when the police got there. So she told him, he beat me up, and they took him to jail. But once they got him there, questioned him, everything, he said that she did it to herself. She beat herself up. And they looked at his hands. He didn't have any bruises, so they let him go. And he said, she was crazy. He would always tell me these stories from his side of the story, and I would never hear the other person's side of the story, but I that made it even more fearful. Like, who is this guy, and what is he capable of? And I hid everything from my family because I thought maybe I'm just being dramatic. Like, I don't want to make a big scene. I don't want to call the police. I don't want to do anything. So I just shoved everything under the rug. I put on a mask, a happy face, and I just went about my life. No one knew that he was living with me. No one knew that we were being intimate together. No one knew any of these secrets because I was ashamed, and I didn't want anyone to know. And I think that's another thing that the devil does, is tries to keep you quiet, because if you can speak it out and you can tell people, then God can start to change you and heal you and, use other people to minister to you. But I held it all in. And so when marriage came into the picture, he wanted to get married, and I thought, well, I can't get rid of him, and I might as well be married to him, so at least I'm not living in sin, and at least I won't feel so shameful all the time. And so we got married, and it just, everything got a lot worse. He got really physically like abusive, to where he would grab me so hard that he would leave bruises on me. He'd squeeze me, he'd bite me, he'd do anything he could that showed that he had control and I didn't have control. And if I said, that really hurts me, he would say, well, you're my wife, I can do whatever I want. So it was once we got married that he really felt like he had complete control, and he did. And I paid all of the bills. I went to work, and he had his own business of photography and videography, so he didn't want to help out with anything. And he said, if you were a good wife, you would understand that I have to invest all my money in my business. And so I just paid for everything. I tried my hardest to be a good wife, and then he started to withdraw, and he wouldn't come home. And he most of the time he'd come home around 2 or 3 in the morning. Some nights he wouldn't come home at all. And I just, I kept thinking, like, I've waited my whole life to find the perfect one for me, and this is what I'm living. And I'm lonely. He wouldn't let me leave the house unless he was with me, because he was afraid that men would hit on me. So I was secluded in my house by myself, and I would call him and say, are you coming home? I made dinner. And he wouldn't come home. And it was just a part of his game of control and just trapping me. And I didn't have anyone. The only person I had at this point was my dog, Alfie. And then one day I was staying the night at my grandma's house, and he was there with Alfie. He was 8 years old, and I had him since he was a puppy. And he would always say things like, you love that dog more than you love me. And he was just a very jealous person. He tried to isolate me from all my friends, all my family, anyone that I loved. And I came home, and Alfie was dead in his little bed, and he had blood coming out of his mouth. And I remember just saying, what happened? What happened to him? And because he was there all night with him, and he said, I don't know. I woke up and he was like that. And he left him there for me to see him like that. And I was just crying by him, and he got a phone call, and he started talking about business and stuff, and I'm just sitting there crying, and he had no, it's like he was heartless, and he did not care at all about my feelings in any situation. And so this, all of this built up, and I just, every day, I would just pray that I could die. And I've always been taught, that God is the giver and taker of life, and that's not up to us to take our lives. So I didn't really consider suicide, but I prayed, and I prayed hard that God would take me, because I hated everything that my life was. I hated that I wasn't worth anything to him, that he chose anything and everything over me, that he used me, and I wasn't allowed to have clothes on. If I had clothes on, he would pull them off of me, and I just felt like an object. And he would say, if you put those clothes back on, I'm leaving. And who does that, right? Like, I was just like, this can't be normal. This is my life, and how did I end up here? And I just felt like an object, and I felt like I had no soul, no worth. And so then about a year after Alfie died, I had gotten another puppy. And of course, he started in again about how I cared about the puppy more than him, and the same thing. I came home, and this time his name was Buck. He was laying on the couch, dead, with blood coming out of his mouth, and he had been in there on the couch with him. And I thought, who just sits there with the dead dog, waiting for your wife to come home and see it? And I still didn't want to believe that he was capable of something like that. And I was married to him, and for some strange, odd reason, I loved him. And I didn't want to believe that he could do something like that. And so I kind of just, well, that's crazy, That's crazy that 2 dogs could die the same way. I got 2 other dogs shortly after that, and they both went missing when he was there and I was gone. And, I just kept thinking, this isn't right. And then it wasn't until, I'm not even reading my notes, that I'm trying to make sure I cover everything. So finally, when I found out that there was other women that he was seeing and talking to, I couldn't do it anymore, because I thought, like, that's the last straw. Like, I can't take it anymore. And I remember talking to my sister Mindy. She's not here today. My oldest sister Misty is here. And I hadn't said anything to any family about anything that was going on in my private life, because I was embarrassed that I had lived such a godly life, and this was my life now. And she said, how are you? Like, how are you really doing? And when people say, how are you? You're just like, oh, I'm fine. But I knew that she was really digging, and I knew she could tell that I was sad. And I just broke down, and I told her everything that was going on, and how miserable I was. And she said, you can leave him. God doesn't want you to live like that. And I remember I just needed that confirmation that it was okay. And so she's like, but before you tell him that you want a divorce, make sure you hide his gun, because you don't know what he could do. So I went home, and I took his gun out of the drawer beside the bed, and I hid it up in the closet. And he got home a little bit later, and as soon as he got home and walked in the bedroom, I said, I want a divorce. And he walked straight to the drawer. And I remembered my heart sunk, and I just thought, oh, this is it. Like, what's he going to do? And the gun wasn't there. And so he said, where'd you put my gun? And fear took over, and I thought, I better just tell him, because if I don't, his anger's just going to escalate, and then I'm really going to be in trouble. And so I just told him where it was, and he got it out, and he just held it in his hand, and kept, slamming it in his hand, and he kept saying, well, tell me you're not one of those women that beat yourself up with the gun and say that I did it. And it was that moment that it dawned on me, like, he did beat her up, and he's going to do the same thing to me. And I said, no, I wouldn't do that. I'm not crazy. And then he just said, well, I'm not giving you a divorce. And he walked out of the room. And I somehow got him to get all of his stuff and get out, because I didn't want to live like that. I don't remember, probably said I was going to call my dad. He was, like, deathly afraid of my dad. So he got his stuff, and he went back to his parents' house. And I just knew I had to get out as fast as possible so that he couldn't find me. And he said, no matter where you go, I'm going to find you. And so I packed all my stuff, and I moved, and he did find me. And the crazy thing is once we were separated, I kept going back. He would call and text. He was relentless, and he would text me all of these nice texts, and he would make me feel like how it was in the very beginning. And he'd make me feel so beautiful, and like he missed me so much, and he can't believe he let me go, and he can't believe he treated me like that. And I just kept getting drawn back. It was like someone who does drugs, and I'm assuming because I never did drugs, but you know how awful it is for you. You know it's killing you. You know you don't want to live in that darkness, but the darkness kind of becomes home, and the pain is all you know. And so I kept just getting sucked back. And so I would go back to him. And I remember we went out one night, and I said, I've heard of Christians having a drink of wine, and I don't think that's bad. I try not to be judgmental on whatever people do. That's between them and God. I just try to read the Bible and, apply it to my life, and we'll see how we all turn out. But I kind of just used that because I wanted something to numb the pain. I wanted to not think about everything that was going on. And so I said, maybe I'll have a glass of wine tonight. And he said, well, I know what you could drink that would make you, relax. And I had never drank in my life, so I didn't know. And he, just as fast as he could, was giving me these drinks, these little bottles of alcohol, vodka and scotch and whatever, I don't know. And just saying, just drink this. And then he'd be like, do you feel relaxed yet? And I didn't know how fast it was supposed to kick in or work or anything. And I'm like, no, I just feel the same. So he did that really fast with quite a bit of stuff. And all of a sudden it hit me, and I couldn't move. So by that time he had pulled up to my house to drop me off. And I said, you just need to walk me in because I can't walk. So he walked me into my bedroom, and I said, I don't want you to stay. I don't want anything to happen. And that's the last thing that I remember. And I woke up. He was in the bed with me. I had no clothes on. I had throw up, like bloody throw up everywhere. And he had his phone, and he had recorded everything he did to me that night. And I just thought, you are my husband. Who gets pleasure out of this, And so I was deeply hurt and deeply disgusted, and I felt, not only did I feel like nauseous, like I was going to die, but I just felt so degraded. And I had an appointment, or an interview with my soon-to-be new boss, and I told him the night before, I don't want to get drunk. I just want to feel relaxed so I don't have to think about all the drama. And I have interview tomorrow, so I can't, be hungover or anything like that. But I had to call the boss and say, I'm going to have to push it. And I ended up telling him, like, I'm sorry, I had too much alcohol for the first time last night. And I was really honest with him because I felt like a zombie. I didn't even know anything that was going on. And so anyway, after that, I told him that, no, you haven't changed. I don't want to be with you. So he went out of the picture again for a little while. And then it was my birthday about a month later, and he starts calling my phone about 1:30 in the morning and said, I have a gift for you. Please just let me in. It's really rude if you don't open the door, and I came all this way with your gift. And so I opened the door, and he just had a rose. And I was like, okay, thank you, bye. And he pushed the door open, and he started to grab me to kiss me, and I was trying to push away, and he said, don't push me, that hurts my feelings. He took me in the bedroom, put me on the bed, started taking my clothes off, and I told him, no, I don't want to do this. And he said, we're married, and this is what married people do. And I said, but I don't want to be married to you. And I was always too afraid to call the police or scream or hit because I didn't know what he would do to me. And that fear just ruled over me. And so I just laid there and let whatever happened happen. And then the next morning he left. And I actually mentioned it to my family that had happened. And Derek, my brother-in-law, he was in the Air Force and said, that's rape. If we were trained in this, and if you say no at all in the experience, if you say you do not want it and they continue, that is rape. It doesn't, and I always thought of rape as like you're going down a back alley and someone, brutally attacks you and rapes you. Like that's what I thought was rape, but I was like, I didn't want it. And I told him that specifically, and it happened. And so they're like, you need to file a restraining order. He's going to keep doing this. And so I went to the courthouse, and he called me while I was there, and he said, I know where you are, and I know what you're doing. And he had put a tracker on my phone. So he had pictures of me there. He had followed me there, and I was trying to go through with it. I was making a police report, and I remember the policeman who was taking the report, he said, so tell me what happened. And I told him, and he said, okay, so this was your husband? And I said, well, yeah, but we're separated. And he's like, okay, but it was your husband. And I remember just feeling like they don't even care. They're not even taking this seriously. He said that I would have to go through trial before I'd even get a restraining order and then see what happens. And I thought, there's no way, because this is just going to make him, my ex, more upset, and it's just going to fuel the fire, and he's going to really try to get me now. So I just, out of fear, I dropped it. And I thought, I'm not going to do this. And so I didn't follow through with the trial or anything like that. So, of course, he did keep coming around. He would sit outside my house until I would leave. He'd follow me to work. He was everywhere. And my sister told me that I needed counseling. And I thought, oh, everything's on a psycho now because only psychos go to counseling, which I don't think that's true anymore. But at the time, I was just thinking, I don't need counseling. Like, I'm in love with this person, and that's why I keep going back. And they're like, it's not normal to keep going back to that kind of life and that environment, that you don't deserve that. And so I went just to, kind of shut them up. And Misty actually went with me the very first time because I was super scared. And it just felt so good to open up. And once I went back the second time and she wasn't with me, then I kind of could spill some more. And I just remember, there's some things I probably told her that no one else in this world knows. I didn't know her, she didn't know me, and I just felt so free to open up. And it felt like once I spoke it out, and I, like someone was saying earlier, when you hear yourself worship, like your heart joins in and knows what you're doing. Like that's what happened. When I spoke out what was happening, all the stuff that I had hidden away, and I heard myself say it, I thought, what are you doing to yourself? Why are you allowing this lifestyle? Why are you going back to that? You don't deserve that. And the counselor, she really didn't say much of anything. I thought that they kind of helped you through everything, but she just listened, which was probably the best she could do. But she would say things like you would see in the movies, like, and how does that make you feel? But really, I'd have to open up and say, like, think, how does that make me feel? Well, that makes me feel worthless, and that makes me feel degraded, and that makes me feel dirty. And to actually say those things out loud and realize the pain that I was living in, and she would say, do you think that's normal? Do you think everyone lives like that? And I kind of, in reality, I know that they don't, but it was my normal, so I didn't really think it was that dramatic. I was just like, that's life, that's my life. But then I was like, no, I don't think that's how people should live. I don't think that that's normal. And so after seeing her, she recommended a book called Inside the Minds of Angry and Controlling Men. And in that book, it talks about how these controlling men, they will always turn a situation around to make you feel bad. If your feelings are hurt, they hurt your feelings, they're going to turn it around and say, I can't believe you're trying to make me feel bad. I can't believe that you don't care about my feelings. I can't. And then you feel crazy. And you're like, wait, should I feel bad for you? Like, you don't even know what's going on in your own mind or your heart. And so it was talking about that. And it was talking about how they lash out and they do something abusive or something horrible. And then they say, I'm sorry, I couldn't help it. And the book says they can't help it. If a police officer walked in that room right then, they would straighten up because they can help it. They can control themselves, but they know they don't have to because they know that you'll take it. And so this book was teaching me all these things that I was like, wow, there's other people living like this, and it's not okay, and it's not normal, and I don't have to believe those lies. I don't have to live that way. And it was really teaching me how to see those things and how to get out of it. And so I told him I did want to go through with the divorce, and somehow he signed the papers. I remember it was on my mom's birthday, and she went with me, and she said it was the best birthday of her life. And we signed the divorce papers, and that was on a January 8th of 2016. And then our divorce was supposed to be March 17th. And then March 16th, guess who's texting and calling and saying they just want to see me one last time? And guess who answered? And he's like, well, I'm actually here at your house right now. Can you please let me in? I just want to see you one more time. And I let him in, and he was crying, and I can't believe that you're not going to be my wife, and I miss you, and I've changed, and I just want to show you that I've changed, and all of the lies. And of course, I still loved him. Of course, I wanted to see the best in him. I wanted to believe it. And so the next day, I just, I was torn because my heart wanted to stay with him, but my mind knew that I couldn't. And so I said, no, we have to go through with this divorce. And we both drove to the courtroom, and we got inside, and I just broke down, and I said, I can't do it. I can't do it. And I was afraid. I was afraid of what life would look like out of that. I was afraid of him always being, over my shoulder. And I just thought, let's just try to make it work one more time. So I said, okay, let's just try our hardest. So he moved back in with me, and this time things were worse. And he still didn't come home a lot, and this time he hid his phone. He wouldn't tell me where he was going. He had so many secrets that I didn't know what he was doing ever. And he brought alcohol into it. Once he saw that what alcohol would do to me, he brought alcohol into the situation again, and he would get it, and he'd say, if you don't drink this, I will. And I was deathly afraid to see him drunk because, believe it or not, he didn't drink the whole time we were together. And I thought, if you're crazy and awful when you're not drunk, what's going to happen when you're drunk? And instead of just calling the police like a normal, sane person would do, I would just drink the drinks that he was telling me to drink because I did whatever he told. I was like a puppet. I was like a zombie. He told me what to do, and I did it. And my life became him giving me drinks, which I don't know if he put some kind of something in the drink or if it was just the drink itself and I wasn't used to alcohol, but I would black out. And I always thought it was a lie when people said they blacked out and don't remember last night, but it happens. And I wouldn't know except for the videos he had on his phone. And he had video after video after video of things that he was doing to me, his wife. And I don't know what he was doing with those videos, but I just kept doing what, like a slave. He would tell me, do this, do that, take off your clothes and do this and do that. And I would just do it. I would just follow his orders. Like I didn't have a brain. And finally I was, it's like I woke up one day and was, what is my life? I would wake up to blood splatters on the wall. And I couldn't remember last night, so I'd have to check my body for what happened, things like that. And I just thought, what kind of life is this? I'd have bruises everywhere where I thought, I don't even know what happened, but I know something bad happened because I'm bruised. And so I said, I had to get out of it. And so we had another court date. We had just postponed our court date whenever I didn't go through with it. So it was postponed to July 28th. And I said, let's just, we can continue to try to work things out because he would beg me, no, I don't want to get a divorce, I'll change. And so I said, until the day of our divorce, we'll try to work through it. And if by that day nothing's changed, then we'll go through and you'll have to go alone because I can't do it. So we went on and on, and during this time, I'm trying to be the best wife I can be. I'm trying to think, what else can I do for this man that he's telling me to do that'll make him happy? He tells me to do this, so I do it. He tells me to do that, so I do it. I cook meals for him. I pay for everything. What else? I would constantly think, what else can I do that would make him happy, that would make him want me? How can I be prettier so that he will only be attracted to me and not want those other women? And I would think of all these things to try to make myself greater so that he would love me. And I didn't realize at the time that it had nothing to do with me. It was him, and he had problems, and he wasn't a man of God, and he didn't know how to love like Christ loved the church. And so finally comes the day of the divorce, and I said, no, we're going through with it. And he went to court, and he got a divorce. We got a divorce in 2 weeks later, and I cut ties with him at that time. I was ready to be done with it. And 2 weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. And thankfully, in Missouri law, I know someone said this earlier, that you can't get a divorce while you're pregnant, and that's still the law. But thankfully, we didn't know I was pregnant, so we were already divorced. But I was pregnant. And I thought, this is the worst. Like, my whole life, I wanted to grow up, be a stay-at-home mom, and be the best wife I could be. I just wanted to be like a Joan Cleaver and just cook meals and watch after the kids. And that was literally my dream. Like, I thought success would be that. And so finding out I was pregnant and being devastated was not how I saw my life, and I just remember calling my sister and telling her, like, I called Misty first, and I was like, I'm pregnant. And, I just cried. And then I called Mindy, and I told her, and she said, oh, congratulations. And I was like, I don't think that's the right thing to say right now. This is not a happy thing. And she said, every baby is a blessing. And I was just like, God, you knew my story before I was ever born. You know the plans you have for me. And if I can't do this, like, I feel like I can't be a single mother. I cannot take care of a baby myself. I don't have enough, funds to take care of a baby. Can you please just take this baby from me? Like, I never wanted to get an abortion or anything like that, but I just wanted him to make me miscarry or something so I didn't have to go through with being a single mother. And so finally I told him, I'm pregnant, and he wanted to get back in the picture. And I said, you can be the father of the baby, but I don't want to get back together. And then so slowly he was like, oh, well, let me come bring you groceries. Let me come help you. And I thought, well, that's really nice. He's trying to take care of me because of the baby. So he started staying there again. And you'd think someone's going to learn about this time in their life, but I thought he'd changed now that there's a baby in the picture. He wants to be good. So he started coming back, and shortly after that, he said, I want to make you dinner, so leave your back door unlocked so I can get in there. And when you get home from work, I'll have dinner on the table, so you don't have to worry about that. And I said, okay. And I got home from work, and I passed him. He was just leaving my house when I got there. And I thought, well, why is he leaving? There was no dinner on the table, and I had locked my dog, Adrian, in the kitchen, and she wasn't in there. And so I'm searching all over the house for Adrian, and I look under my bed, and she's laying there with blood, and she, I could see her blink her eyes really slow. And she was deathly afraid of him. Every time he came around, she would hide and she would pee, which was so unlike her. So I knew that something was going on when I wasn't around that made her scared. And so I took her to the vet, and a little while later, that night she died, and blood coming out of her mouth. And she had bruises all over her body. She had bruised gums. And they said it was trauma. And I still, at that time, didn't register like he did it. Like, what else could have happened? She's in the house, And so I asked him to go bury her with Alfie where he was, and he took her. And then I remember I had said something on Facebook about Adrian passing away, and a friend of mine, not even really a friend, but a lady I knew from church a long time ago, she messaged me, and she said, I know you don't want to think about this, but I think it's your ex-husband that is killing all your dogs. And it was like that moment, the Holy Spirit used her, and the Holy Spirit, I was shaking, and I knew it. And I knew that my baby could not be around someone like that. And at this time, I realized that it wasn't just one baby, it was two. Because I think that week or a week before, we had found out that I was having twins. And so I just knew that I had to protect my babies. And so I said, actually bring her body back, because I'm going to have an autopsy done on her, and I'm going to prove that you did it, because I know you did it. And he said, it was a big drawn out story. Well, he tried to bring the dog to me, but I wouldn't answer the door. All these lies. And then so he said, but now I don't have the body. And I said, well, what do you mean? You said you buried it. Oh, well, actually, I threw it out in the woods and I can't find it. So he had all these stories of why he couldn't, bring me the dog. And I knew that he had killed her. And I said, stay away from us. And it wasn't about me anymore. It wasn't about my worth anymore. I cared about my babies. And God sent them to save me from him. And if it wasn't for my babies, I would have kept going back. And as stupid as that sounds, I was living in fear. I was living in darkness, and that pain was comfortable to me because that's all I knew, and that was my comfort. And so because of them, I filed for a restraining order. And I was going to go through with it, and I did go through with it. And in court, I brought up that he, took out the gun whenever I wanted a divorce. I showed pictures of bruises. I had also had a police officer friend there who actually saw him grab me by the neck. And so I thought, there's no way they're not going to give me a restraining order if I show them all these things, and I'm pregnant, and I need to keep my baby safe. And they didn't give it to me. And they said, this is a court for people, not for dogs. And I said, it doesn't matter. I'm not telling you about the dog. I'm telling you that he's an evil person. I'm showing you that this is what he's capable of. And they said, because you kept going back to him, you must not have been really afraid for your life. So they didn't give me a restraining order. And I left that courtroom, and I got in the car, and I literally yelled at God. And I said, how could you let this happen? Because I had been praying, and I had been confessing the word and standing on the word. And I knew that, God would prevail and give me, protection. And I didn't get that. But I can say that he's never seen or touched my babies. And God is my ultimate protection. I don't need a piece of paper that says, that he can't come near me, because God has kept him away, and God has protected us. And God has supplied all of our needs, and I thought I couldn't do one, and I'm doing two. So I think God kind of probably laughed about that. But sorry, I have snot. But I didn't even go by my notes, but I did pray today that the Holy Spirit would have me say whatever I needed to say. So I guess I didn't really need those, but I do have some scriptures and some little phrases that have helped me, and I just thought I'd share some of them. It says, sometimes what you're most afraid of doing is the very thing that will set you free. And that was in my case. I was so afraid to break free of that. I was so afraid to live a different life and to get out of that. And when I finally did is when I found my true freedom, and God showed me who I am in him and how I am beautiful. I'm a beautiful creation in him, and he's created me to be everything he wants me to be. I don't have to try to live up to anyone else's standards. And so I definitely found freedom once I got out of what I was afraid of doing. And another thing said, the Saturday before Easter proves that just because God seems silent, it doesn't mean he's not working. So in the darkest times when you feel like, God, where are you? I need you. Why aren't you here? Like, he's working out a plan for your life. And if you believe it and you ask him to show you what that plan is, he has an amazing plan that you don't even, you can't even comprehend. And it says, in the darkest times, God may be preparing the biggest breakthrough. And he's brought me freedom from abuse. He's brought me freedom from fear and depression and self-doubt. And I know who I am in him now. And for anyone who might be going through any kind of struggle or any kind of bondage that you feel like you just can't break free, like, God is the ultimate freedom, and we have to choose to be set free. We have to choose to not let fear rule over us. And these are kind of some verses that someone shared with me about my situation specifically. But Isaiah 61:7 says, instead of your shame, you will receive a double portion, and instead of disgrace, you will rejoice in your inheritance. And so you will inherit a double portion in your land, and everlasting joy will be yours. And I always talk about my babies as my double portion. And because of all the pain and all the the trauma I went through, they were the outcome, and I would go through it a million more times to have them. And they're my double blessings, my double portion. And then 2 Timothy 1:7 says, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. And Zechariah 9:12. Come back to the place of safety, all you prisoners who still have hope. I promise this very day that I will repay you 2 blessings for each of your troubles. They are my 2 blessings. And there's Isaiah 46:4. I have made you, and I will carry you, and I will sustain you, and I will rescue you. And that was one verse that really got me through, that he is our ultimate rescuer, but we have to let him rescue us. We have to try to grab onto him for him to pull us out of that pit, because he's not going to pull us out if we don't want to be pulled out. And so we have to reach for him, and he'll pull us. We don't have to try to climb out on our own, but we have to let him pull us out. And then there's Haggai 2:9. The new temple will be more beautiful than the first, says the Lord. And in this place I will bring peace, announces the Lord who rules over all. And so I feel like that's kind of like my life, with the temple being rebuilt, and it's more beautiful now, and I have peace now. And, me and my boys, we don't know what God has in store for us, but we know it's great things. And then I'll just leave you with a story about an elephant that I heard. A man in India who kept his elephants tied to a post with a small rope. And there are these huge elephants, and someone said, how are the elephants not breaking free from this rope? And he said, well, we train them when they're babies, we tie them up, and at that time it is strong enough to hold them. So they never attempt to get free again, because they know in their minds they think they can't. And that's how I think a lot of us are in the beginning. We try to get free, and we can't, and we can't, and we can't. And we just forget trying. We don't even try, because we are in that state of mind that we're stuck in that place and that we can't get out. But we can get out, and if we allow God to renew our minds and we count on him to be our strength, we're not those baby elephants anymore, and we can break free. So that's all I have.